The Russia-Ukraine war has pushed up oil prices across the world. Joe Biden just announced that he'll be releasing 1 million barrels of oil per day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve was made to be used in an emergency. Is this a big enough emergency to justify using that oil? What impact will it really have on oil prices? And if you could vote directly on this policy, would you vote for it or against it? If you're new to my content, One Direct Democracy is a movement for upgrading the global democratic system by taking power away from the politicians and putting it in the hands of the people by using direct democracy. It will also eliminate left and right-wing politics. I've created the technology and a specific plan for how to make it work. If you want more information, check out the links in the description. For each episode, I'll pick an important issue, outline the problem, talk about the solutions, and then you can decide how you would vote. In this case, we'll be talking about whether oil should be released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Okay, if you're just looking for another talking head that isn't interested in actually doing anything, you're in the wrong place. If you want to be part of the solution, let's get into it.
Our prices are rising because of Putin's action. There isn't enough supply. And the bottom line is, if we want lower gas prices, we need to have more oil supply right now. Today, I'm authorizing the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months, over 180 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is a wartime bridge to increase oil supply until production ramps up later this year. And it is by far the largest release of our national reserve in our history. It will provide a historic amount of supply for a historic amount of time, a 6 months bridge to the fall. And we'll use the revenue from selling the oil now to restock the Strategic Petroleum Reserve when prices are lower. So we'll be ready. We'll be ready for future emergencies.
Okay, the first question is, what is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? According to this article from the BBC, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is intended to protect the country's access to oil in case of natural disasters or national security issues, sits in salt dome caverns along the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana. Okay, so let's get clear about the numbers in Joe Biden's policy. The administration is reportedly considering extending the release for as long as 6 months, with a potential limit of 180 million barrels, drawn from the current national reserves of 568 million barrels. So is this just politics, or is there a justifiable reason for accessing the reserves? The possible injection into the market of oil reserves, first reported by Bloomberg, comes as the Biden administration is wrestling with the political fallout of high petrol prices and rising inflation. According to the American Automobile Association, the US average now stands at $4.23 a gallon, up from $2.87 a year ago. But that's just the average. Some states have a much bigger problem than others. Extraordinary measures, including gas rebates, are being considered by California, the worst hit state, where an average gallon of petrol now costs close to $6. The first issue that comes to mind here is whether this will actually impact oil prices at all. The 1 million barrels per day sounds like a lot, but it's actually nothing in the general scheme of the global supply of oil. If this is going to work, it needs to be part of a bigger plan to lower oil prices. Any US release of national reserves is likely to be coordinated with other countries under the auspices of the International Energy Agency. OPEC oil producers have so far resisted increasing output in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, insisting that there is no global shortage. So this is part of a plan with countries that sanctioned Russia, not part of a plan with countries that supply oil. Biden confirmed that he decided on the measure in consultation with Western partners, who have joined the US in imposing economic sanctions on Russia for the Ukraine invasion. Earlier this month, the US imposed a ban on Russian oil imports. Russia is the second largest exporter of oil in the world. Biden's plan also includes increasing domestic oil production in the United States. Biden's plan called for not just immediately increasing supply, but for also increasing domestic production. In a statement, the White House said that the oil and gas industry is sitting on more than 12 million acres of non-producing federal land, with 9,000 unused, but already approved permits for production. It said Biden would call on Congress to make oil companies pay fees on unused wells and land. So that's the plan as it relates to the short-term supply of oil. The related long-term issue here is increasing the use of sustainable energy. Biden also said he was including a directive to strengthen our clean energy economy. We need to embrace all the tools and technologies that can help free us from our dependence on fossil fuels and move toward more homegrown clean energy technologies made by American companies and American workers. Okay, well, that's a statement of intent, but what's he actually planning to do? He said he would use the Defense Production Act to secure America's supply chains for the critical materials that go into batteries for electric vehicles and storage of renewable energy, such as lithium, graphite, and nickel. Now, the Defense Production Act is a very rarely used piece of legislation that is used by governments to force private companies to act in a manner that's in the interests of the country. The Congressional Progressives Caucus has already called on Biden to do just that, to use the act to bolster the clean energy sector. And what will be the overall impact from investing in green energy? Biden claimed that as well as new oil production, investing in green energy would also bring down energy prices. Yes, building a base in America clean energy future will help safeguard our national security. Yes, it will help us tackle climate change. Yes, it will help us ensure that Americans create millions of good-paying jobs for generations to come. But the most important thing my plan will do right away is save your family money.
I'm issuing a directive to strengthen our clean energy economy. I'm going to use the Defense Production Act to secure American supply chains for the critical materials that go into batteries for electric vehicles and the storage of renewable energy, lithium, graphite, nickel, and so much more. We need to end our long-term reliance on China and other countries for inputs that will power the future. Look, the bottom line is this. Between ramping up production in the short term and driving down demand in the long term, we can free ourselves from our dependence on imported oil from across the world.
Okay, this is my personal opinion on this issue. The Russia-Ukraine war is obviously an emergency for Ukraine, but I don't think it's a big enough emergency for global oil prices. The reality is that everybody that uses oil knows that oil is a finite resource, and they know with 100% certainty that the price of a finite resource will increase over time. A temporary increase in supply won't make any difference to the big picture. The best short-term solution is to increase the supply of oil from oil production as opposed to from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The best long-term solution is transitioning away from fossil fuels to green energy. This means that oil prices will increase in the short term. Taxpayers should not have to bail out people that deliberately decide to use a finite resource that they know will increase constantly over the short, medium, and long term. I've created a listing on the One Direct Democracy platform so that we can develop ideas about what is the best use of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve during the Russia-Ukraine war. You can add your own ideas or vote and comment on ideas from other people. You can also create your own listings for people to vote on. It's a simple way to get used to using the One Direct Democracy system. The link's in the description. So that's a summary of the key issues. If you could vote directly on this policy to release 1 million barrels per day of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, would you vote for it or against it? Let me know in the comments. The reality is that we've reached a point in time in our evolution where representative democracy no longer serves the will of the people. That's why I created One Direct Democracy. It's a movement for upgrading the global democratic system by taking power away from politicians and putting it in the hands of the people by using direct democracy. I've created the technology, a framework for direct democracy, and a plan for how to make it happen. And we don't have to convince any politicians or powerful people to do anything to make it happen. We have the power to do it on our own. We just have to decide to do it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, or you want more information about me or One Direct Democracy, check out the other videos on my channel and the links in the description. Direct democracy is the purest form of democracy. Representative democracy is an outdated, blunt instrument.